The deal was dead. Damien Blackwood, the most ruthless billionaire crime lord in the city, was 5 seconds away from walking out the door, taking his $100 million empire with him. The restaurant went silent. The manager was trembling. No one could calm him down. He was screaming in a language no one in that Western dining room understood. But just as his hand touched the gold handle of the exit, a trembling voice cut through the tension. It wasn't a diplomat. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Sarah, the invisible waitress everyone had ignored all night. She spoke 6 words in a dialect so rare it made the devil himself freeze in his tracks. And what happened next didn't just change her tip. It changed history. The rain battered against the reinforced glass windows of the Golden Onyx, Manhattan's most exclusive, members-only dining establishment. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil, aged leather, and fear. Sarah adjusted her apron, her fingers trembling slightly. She was invisible here. That was the first rule the floor manager, Marcus, had drilled into her head when she took this job 2 weeks ago. You are furniture, Sarah. You serve the wine, you clear the plates, and you do not speak unless spoken to. These men own the city. You are nothing. Sarah bit her lip, tasting the metallic tang of blood. She needed this job. Her little brother, Toby, was sitting in a crumbling apartment in Queens, waiting for a specialist appointment that cost more than her father had made in a year. The debt collectors were calling every hour. She was exhausted, hungry, and terrified of losing the only paycheck that kept the lights on. "Table 4 is arriving," Marcus hissed, grabbing Sarah's arm hard enough to bruise. "Look sharp, it's Damien Blackwood." The kitchen went silent. Even the head chef, a man with an ego the size of the Empire State Building, stopped shouting. Damien Blackwood. The name alone was enough to lower property values. The tabloids called him a venture capitalist. The streets knew him as the Sultan of the West. He controlled shipping lanes, real estate, and things far darker. He was half British, half Middle Eastern royalty, and entirely dangerous. The double doors swung open. He didn't walk in. He stormed in. Damien was tall, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Sarah's entire life education. His face was striking, sharp jawline, eyes the color of obsidian, but it was twisted in a scowl of pure, unadulterated rage. Flanking him were 4 bodyguards, massive men who scanned the room like predators. Trailing behind was a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit, his translator presumably. "I specifically asked for a private wing," Damien shouted, his voice booming off the mahogany walls. He spoke with a clipped, British accent, but the underlying fury was universal. "Mr. Blackwood," Marcus stammered, bowing low. "Please, the private wing is being prepared. If you could just—" "I don't have time for just," Damien snapped. He threw his coat at a passing busboy without looking. He sat down at the head of the largest table, radiating a heat that made the candle flames flicker. Sarah was pushed forward by Marcus. "Water. Now." She approached the table, keeping her eyes lowered. As she poured the sparkling water into the crystal glass, she could hear Damien muttering. He wasn't speaking English anymore. He was speaking Arabic, specifically a rough, rapid-fire Levantine dialect mixed with street slang that you wouldn't learn in a textbook. He was on his phone, the device gripped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Al-Bada'a Magshusha. I told them no delays. If the shipment isn't in the harbor by midnight, I will burn their warehouses to the ground." Damien roared into the phone in Arabic. The translator, the nervous man in the cheap suit, leaned in. "Sir, the other party says they need more time." Damien slammed the phone onto the table, cracking the screen. He looked at the translator with cold, deadly eyes. "I didn't ask you what they said. I told you to tell them I am done negotiating. I told them, sir. But the connection—" The translator lied. Sarah could tell he was lying. She had heard the voice on the other end of the line. The translator hadn't understood the specific dialect the other party was using. He was winging it, and he was failing. Sarah finished pouring the water. She tried to back away, to disappear back into the shadows. "This is incompetence." Damien stood up, knocking his chair back. The sound was like a gunshot. The entire restaurant froze. Diners with net worths in the billions put down their forks, terrified to look up. "I am surrounded by idiots," Damien growled, switching back to English. He looked at his entourage. "We are leaving. Cancel the investment. If they can't speak my language, they don't get my money." Marcus, the manager, looked like he was going to faint. Losing Damien Blackwood as a client would ruin the Golden Onyx. "Mr. Blackwood, please. The chef has prepared the Wagyu exactly how you—" "I said move!" Damien shoved past his own bodyguards. He was 5 feet from Sarah. He was 5 seconds from the door. Sarah's heart hammered. If he left, the restaurant would lose its biggest whale. Marcus would fire everyone in a rage. She would lose the insurance for Toby. She didn't think. She just reacted to the words she had heard on the phone. The words the translator had missed. "Saidi," Sarah said. Her voice was soft, but in the dead silence, it carried. Damien didn't stop. He reached for the door handle. Sarah took a breath and spoke louder, her accent perfect, honed by years of childhood years living in Beirut before her father's tragic accident. "The shipment isn't delayed, sir. The man on the phone said the Fox is waiting at the dock. He was using code. Your translator missed it." She spoke in English, but she used the specific Arabic term for fox, al-thalab, with the correct guttural pronunciation. The world seemed to stop spinning. Damien's hand froze on the brass handle of the door. For 3 agonizing seconds, no one breathed. Marcus looked at Sarah with eyes that screamed, "You're fired." The bodyguards reached into their jackets. Slowly, terrifyingly, Damien Blackwood turned around. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at his bodyguards. He looked down, straight at the small waitress with the messy bun and the stained apron. He walked back toward her, each step heavy and deliberate. He stopped inches from her face. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and cold rain. "What did you say?" he whispered. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory curiosity. Sarah's knees shook, but she held her ground. She looked up into his obsidian eyes. "The man on the phone, sir. He didn't say he needed time. He said Al-Thalab is waiting. In the Gulf dialect, that means the deal is ready, but they suspect a trap. Your translator told you they were stalling. They aren't stalling. They are scared." Damien stared at her. His eyes flicked to his translator, who was now pale as a sheet and sweating profusely. "Is that true?" Damien asked the translator, his voice deceptively calm. I thought the signal was bad," the translator stammered. Damien didn't say another word. He simply gestured to his head of security. 2 massive men grabbed the translator and dragged him out the side exit. The man's pleas for mercy were muffled by the heavy doors. Damien turned back to Sarah. The silence in the room was deafening. "What is your name?" "Sarah, sir." "Sarah Miller." Damien studied her face, as if he were appraising a diamond for flaws. "Sarah Miller, you have 10 seconds to explain how a waitress at the Golden Onyx knows the street codes of the Beirut underworld." The restaurant was still frozen. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Sarah could feel the heat of the spotlight on her, though the lights were dim. 5 seconds, Damien said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. My father, Sarah blurted out, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. He was a petroleum engineer. We lived in the Middle East for 12 years. I went to school there. I learned the language on the playground, not in a classroom. I know the slang because I grew up with it. It was the truth. Mostly. She left out the part about how her father had been framed, lost everything, and died of a broken heart, leaving them penniless in America. Damien tilted his head. The explanation seemed to satisfy him, or at least pause his suspicion. He looked at the empty seat where his translator had been sitting moments ago. Then he looked at the phone on the table. It was ringing again. He picked it up and held it out to Sarah. "Answer it," he commanded. "Sir?" Sarah blinked, confused. "I said answer it. You say you understand them? Prove it. Tell them I am not a man to be toyed with. Tell them if the fox is scared, he should stay in his hole. I want the goods delivered to the warehouse in 20 minutes, or the deal is void." Marcus stepped forward, trembling. "Mr. Blackwood, surely you can't expect a waitress to handle a business negotiation of this magnitude. She is uneducated. She—" "Silence!" Damien didn't even look at the manager. He kept his eyes locked on Sarah. "Well, Sarah Miller, do you want to clear tables for the rest of your life? Or do you want to make $5,000 in the next 5 minutes? $5,000. That was Toby's medication for 3 months. That was the rent arrears. Sarah took the phone. Her hands were shaking, but as soon as she pressed the green button and heard the harsh voice on the other end, a switch flipped in her brain. She wasn't Sarah the poor waitress anymore. She was the girl who had survived the streets of Beirut when her father went bankrupt. She answered in flawless, rapid Arabic. She didn't just translate Damien's message. She conveyed his anger. She used the tone of a woman who represented power. She told them the fox was risking his life by making the Sultan wait. She listened, nodded, and then looked at Damien. "They are moving. They apologize for the hesitation. They thought you were working with the police because of the bad translation earlier. They are delivering to the warehouse now." Damien watched her, his expression unreadable. He took the phone back and checked a notification. A moment later, a text came through confirming the movement of the assets. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just found blood in the water. "Excellent." He sat back down in his chair. "Everyone sit," he barked at the room. The diners hurriedly resumed eating, forks clinking nervously against china. The tension dissipated slightly, but around table 4, the air remained heavy. "Sit down, Sarah," Damien said, kicking out the chair next to him. "Sir, I have other tables. My manager," Damien glanced at Marcus. "She's off the clock. Put her hours on my tab, and bring us a bottle of the 1982 Chateau Margaux. Now." Marcus nodded frantically and ran to the wine cellar. Sarah sat down on the velvet chair. It felt wrong. She was wearing a stained apron next to a man in a $10,000 suit. "You saved me a considerable amount of headache tonight, Sarah," Damien said, pouring her a glass of water himself. "My previous translator was a Harvard graduate. Useless. He knew the words, but he didn't know the music of the language." "I just did what I had to do," Sarah said quietly. "Please, sir. The money you mentioned. Direct and desperate. I like that." Damien pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket. He wrote a number and slid it across the table. Sarah looked at it. It wasn't $5,000. It was $10,000. "Take it," he said. "But there is a condition." Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering over the check. "What condition?" Damien leaned in close. The danger in his eyes was back, swirling like smoke. That translator I just fired? He wasn't just incompetent, he was leaking information. He was misinterpreting on purpose to sabotage my deals. I have enemies, Sarah, many of them. And right now, I have a major merger happening in Dubai in 3 days. I need someone who speaks the language, someone who is invisible, and someone who needs money enough to be loyal. He took a sip of his water. I am offering you a job, not as a waitress. As my personal interpreter for the week, we fly to Dubai tomorrow morning. You will be paid $50,000 for the week, plus expenses. If you do well, I'll clear whatever debts you have. Sarah's mouth went dry. $50,000. It would change everything. It would save Toby. But she looked at the men standing behind Damien, the guns bulging under their jackets, the cold, hard reality of who this man was. He was the Mafia. He was a criminal. And if I say no, she asked. Damien shrugged. Then you take this 10,000, you walk out, and you go back to being invisible. But know this, Sarah Miller. You have a fire in you. I saw it when you spoke to me. You don't belong serving pasta to fat tourists. You belong in the game. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. I'm leaving now. My driver will be outside your apartment at 6:00 a.m. tomorrow. Be there, and your life changes. Don't be there, and you'll never see me again. He dropped a heavy gold business card on the table next to the check. Think carefully, Sarah. The fox isn't the only one who should be scared of traps. Damien turned and walked out, his entourage swallowing him up. The restaurant was silent again. Sarah sat alone at the best table in the house, staring at the check that could save her brother, and the business card that could cost her her soul. She looked over at Marcus, who was watching her with a mixture of jealousy and fear. She grabbed the check. She grabbed the card. She knew she was going to be in that car at 6 a.m. She just didn't know that by entering Damien Blackwood's car, she was stepping into a war that had nothing to do with language and everything to do with survival. At 5:55 a.m., Sarah stood on the cracked pavement outside her apartment building in Queens. It was drizzling again, a grey, miserable mist that soaked into her thin hoodie. She clutched a small duffel bag containing the few decent clothes she owned. Inside the apartment, her Aunt Linda, a woman who smelled of cigarettes and resentment, was asleep on the couch. Sarah had left a note and transferred the first $5,000 of the check to Linda's account for Toby's care. She had kissed her sleeping brother on the forehead, whispering a promise that she would come back with enough money to fix his kidneys, to fix everything. At exactly 6 a.m., a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom turned the corner. It looked like a spaceship gliding through the trash-strewn street. The rear window rolled down. It wasn't Damien. It was a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow and eyes that looked like they had seen war. "Sarah Miller?" the man asked. His voice was gravel. "Yes. Get in. Boss is waiting at Teterboro." Sarah slid into the leather interior. The car smelled of new money and old secrets. As they pulled away, she looked back at the crumbling brick building where her brother slept. She felt a pang of terror. What have I done? 30 minutes later, she was standing on the tarmac at a private airfield. The rain had stopped. In front of her sat a Gulfstream G650, its engines whining with a high-pitched scream. She climbed the stairs. The interior was unlike anything she had ever seen. Cream leather, polished walnut wood, and a bar that looked better stocked than the entirety of the Golden Onyx. Damien was sitting in a club chair, reviewing documents on a tablet. He didn't look up when she entered. "You're late," he said. "It's 6:45. The drive took—" "You're late because you hesitated," Damien cut in, finally looking at her. He was wearing a casual black sweater that fit him perfectly, making him look less like a CEO and more like a tactical operative. "I saw the footage from the car. You stood on the sidewalk for 2 minutes before getting in. In my world, 2 minutes is the difference between a closed deal and a closed casket. Sarah swallowed hard. I'm here now. So you are. Damien gestured to the seat opposite him. Meet Julian. He's my head of operations. Sarah turned. The man from the car, the one with the scar, was standing by the cockpit door. Julian looked at Sarah with open disdain. She's a waitress, Damien, Julian spat, crossing his arms. We're walking into a meeting with the Al-Fayed syndicate, and you want to bring a girl who serves appetizers for a living? This is a mistake. She caught the Fox code, Julian, Damien said calmly, not looking away from his screen. You didn't. My former translator didn't. She did. She got lucky, Julian growled. If she freezes in Dubai, we are dead. Victor Cray isn't going to be charmed by her sob story. Damien closed his tablet and looked at Sarah. The intensity of his gaze made her feel like she was being X-rayed. Julian thinks you're a liability. Prove him wrong. What do you know about the Al-Fayed family? Sarah's mind raced. She remembered the newspapers her father used to read in Beirut. She remembered the whispers in the markets. The Al-Fayeds aren't just a family, Sarah said, her voice gaining traction. They are a tribe. They control the shipping ports in Jebel Orly. They are traditionalists. They hate direct confrontation. If you yell at them, they shut down. If you insult their hospitality, they will smile at you while they sign your execution order. Damien's eyebrows raised slightly, a flicker of approval. And Victor Cray? Damien asked. I don't know him personally, but I know the name. He's an American contractor, mercenary. He sells security systems that don't work to people who don't know better. Damien smirked. Close. He sells security systems that do work, but he keeps the master key for himself. And right now, he's trying to sell the Al-Fayeds a system that would lock me out of the Middle East forever. The plane began to taxi. Damien unbuckled his seatbelt, a flagrant violation of safety rules, and walked over to a garment rack at the back of the cabin. Stand up, he ordered Sarah. She stood up, feeling small in her jeans and hoodie. Damien pulled a dress from a bag. It was navy blue, structured, modest, but undeniably expensive. He tossed it to her. Put this on in the bathroom. Burn the hoodie. Excuse me? You are not Sarah, the waitress, anymore. You are Sarah, my executive consultant. You need to look like you own the room, not like you're there to clean it. Julian, give her the briefing dossier. Julian shoved a thick folder into Sarah's chest as she walked past him to the lavatory. Don't mess this up, princess, he whispered. I'm watching you. In the small, mirrored bathroom of the jet, Sarah changed into the dress. It fit perfectly. She looked at herself in the mirror. She pulled her hair back into a severe, sleek bun. She applied the lipstick she found in the amenity kit, a deep crimson. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. The fear was still there in the eyes, but there was something else, too. Determination. She was doing this for Toby. When she stepped back out into the cabin, the plane was already in the air, climbing through the clouds. Damien looked up. He didn't say a word. He just stared at her for a long beat, his eyes traveling from her shoes to her eyes. The air in the cabin seemed to tighten. Better, he finally said, his voice dropping an octave. Now sit. We have 12 hours to teach you how to lie to a warlord. The heat in Dubai hit them the moment the cabin door opened. It was a dry, oppressive wall of air. A convoy of 3 armored SUVs was waiting on the tarmac. Damien moved with a speed that forced Sarah to jog to keep up. He wore sunglasses now, masking his expressions. The meeting has been moved, Julian said, pressing his earpiece. Victor Cray changed the location. He wants to meet at the Oasis Garden, not the office. Damien stopped. The garden? That's open ground, public. He says it's a gesture of transparency, Julian said. It's a power play, Sarah interrupted. Both men looked at her. In Arab culture, specifically the business culture of the older generation, like the Al-Fayeds, Sarah explained rapidly, inviting you to a garden means you are a guest, not a partner. Guests have no rights. He's trying to strip you of your authority before you even sit down. If you accept the location, you've already lost the negotiation. Damien looked at her. Then a slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. She's right. He turned to Julian. Tell Cray we meet at the Burj Royale penthouse, or we don't meet at all. Tell him I don't do business in the heat. Julian hesitated. Boss, Cray is volatile. If we push, do it, Damien barked. Julian made the call. 2 minutes of tense silence followed. Sarah stood on the tarmac, sweat trickling down her back, wondering if she had just ruined $1 billion deal. Julian looked up, his face sour. He agreed. The penthouse, in 1 hour. Damien turned to Sarah. Good catch. Get in the car. The Burj Royale was a spire of glass piercing the sky. The elevator ride to the 90th floor took long enough for Sarah's heart rate to triple. When the doors opened, they were greeted by luxury that made the golden onyx look like a cafeteria. Gold leaf on the ceiling, silk carpets, and a panoramic view of the Persian Gulf. At the far end of the room sat 3 men. In the center was Sheikh Ahmed Al-Fayed, an elderly man in traditional white robes, his face weathered and unreadable. To his left was his son, a younger man glued to his phone. To the right sat Victor Cray. Victor was a massive American, with a shaved head and a suit that looked too tight for his muscles. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Damien, Victor boomed, standing up and spreading his arms. So good of you to join us. I see you brought company. Victor's eyes lingered on Sarah. It felt slimy. My consultant, Sarah, Damien said coolly, not shaking Victor's hand. He nodded respectfully to the sheikh. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Ahmed. Wa alaikum assalam, the sheikh replied, his voice raspy. They sat. The tension was immediate. Victor launched into his pitch. He was speaking English, fast and aggressive. He was trying to sell the sheikh on a partnership that would cut Damien's shipping lines out of the port. Damien's infrastructure is old news, sheikh, Victor said, leaning forward. My systems are automated. No human error, no leaks. We can double your throughput in 6 months. The sheikh listened, nodding slowly. He turned to his son and whispered something in a very low, very specific Bedouin dialect. The son whispered back. Damien looked at Sarah. He couldn't understand them. Neither could Victor. Sarah's blood ran cold. She heard what the son had said. The American is lying about the capacity. But the other one, Blackwood, he smells of desperation. Let them fight. We will take the winner's assets for half price. But it was what the sheikh said next that made Sarah's heart stop. The sheikh looked at Victor and said, in that same obscure dialect, Is the gift prepared for Mr. Blackwood? And Victor, the American who supposedly didn't speak Arabic, tapped his finger twice on the table. A subtle, almost invisible nod. Victor understood the dialect. He had been pretending not to understand, so he could hear everything. And there was a gift, a trap. Sarah kicked Damien under the table, hard. Damien's eyes snapped to hers. He didn't react outwardly, but she saw the question in his gaze. Sarah grabbed the water pitcher to pour herself a glass, using the motion to lean closer to Damien. Victor speaks the dialect, she whispered, barely moving her lips, smiling as if she were making a polite comment. He understands everything. And there is a gift coming for you. It's a trap. Damien's face remained stone, but his hand moved slowly beneath the table, likely toward the small pistol strapped to his ankle. "Sheikh Ahmed," Damien said loudly, interrupting Victor. "Before we discuss capacity, I have a question about honor." The room went silent. The word honor was heavy. "Mr. Cray here claims to be transparent," Damien continued, his voice silky smooth but laced with venom. "Yet he understands your private tongue, does he not? He has been listening to your family secrets all afternoon." Victor's smile vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Damien looked at Sarah. "Sarah, ask the sheikh in his own tongue why the American tapped his finger when the gift was mentioned." Sarah turned to the sheikh. This was it, the point of no return. "Ya sheikh," Sarah spoke clearly, her accent shifting perfectly to the Bedouin dialect. "Mr. Blackwood wishes to know, if a guest pretends to be deaf to steal his host's words, is he a partner or a spy?" The sheikh froze. He looked at Victor, his eyes narrowing into slits. The old man was traditional. Deceit was part of business. But disrespect? That was unforgivable. "You understand my tongue?" the sheikh asked Victor in English, his voice low and dangerous. Victor stood up, his face flushing red. "This girl is lying. She's trying to confuse you." "I saw the signal, Victor," Damien said, standing up slowly. "And I think the sheikh saw it too, now that he knows where to look." The sheikh slammed his hand on the table. His bodyguards stepped forward, hands on their weapons. "Get out!" the sheikh hissed at Victor. "Our negotiations are suspended." Victor looked furious. He glared at Damien, and then his eyes drilled into Sarah. It was a look of pure hatred. He had just lost $1 billion contract because of a waitress. "You'll regret this, Blackwood," Victor snarled. "And you?" He pointed a thick finger at Sarah. "I'm going to find out who you are, and when I do, no one will be able to put you back together." Victor stormed out. Damien exhaled, a long breath. He looked at the sheikh. "I apologize for the disruption, sheikh. But I believe honesty is the best foundation for profit." The sheikh looked at Damien, then at Sarah. A slow smile cracked his weathered face. "You have a clever tongue, girl," the sheikh said. "Sit. Let us drink tea. Then we talk about shipping." Sarah sank back into her chair, her legs trembling uncontrollably under the table. She had done it. She had saved the deal. But as the tea was poured, she happened to glance toward the window, at the reflection of the room. She saw Julian standing by the door. Julian wasn't looking at the sheikh. He wasn't looking at Damien. He was texting. And for a split second, Sarah saw the reflection of his phone screen. It was a message to a contact saved only as V. The text read, "Plan B, tonight. The girl is the problem." Sarah's blood froze. V. Victor. Julian wasn't just a skeptic. He was working with Victor, and Sarah had just put a target on her own back. The elevator ride down from the penthouse was suffocating. Sarah stood in the back corner, clutching her purse, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every time Julian glanced at her, she felt a wave of nausea. He was smiling now, a tight, predatory smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. He thought he had won. He thought she was just a waitress who got lucky, not a woman who had just seen his death warrant on a screen. "Excellent work, boss," Julian said, his voice smooth. "The sheikh is eating out of your hand. I've arranged for the inspection of the Jebel Ali warehouse tonight. The sheikh insists we verify the inventory before the contracts are signed tomorrow." Damien nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked tired but triumphant. "Good. We go straight there. I want this done." Sir, Sarah spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe we should go back to the hotel first. Debrief. It's been a long day. She needed to get him alone. She needed to tell him about the text message without Julian hearing. Damien looked at her, surprised by her interference. The deal isn't done until the inventory is verified, Sarah. You of all people should know that momentum is everything. But we go to the warehouse, Damien said, his tone final. He wasn't angry, but he was dismissing her. He didn't know the danger he was walking into. They exited the lobby and moved toward the waiting convoy. The sun had set, and the Dubai heat had morphed into a humid, heavy blanket. Julian opened the rear door of the lead SUV for Damien. I'll ride shotgun, boss. Security protocol. Sarah moved to get in next to Damien, but Julian blocked her path with a stiff arm. Take the second car, sweetheart, Julian sneered. This is a strategy session. You're just the translator. No, Damien said from inside the car. Let her in. She earned her seat. Julian's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. Sarah scrambled inside, sliding across the leather seat. As Julian slammed the door and climbed into the front passenger seat, Sarah felt the click of the locks. It sounded like a prison cell closing. The convoy sped off onto Sheikh Zayed Road, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. Sarah sat rigidly. She couldn't speak freely. The partition between the driver nor Julian and the back seat was down. Julian could hear everything. She reached for her phone to type a message to Damien, but she saw Julian watching her in the rearview mirror. His eyes were locked on her hands. If she texted, he would know she was up to something. He might trigger the trap early. She had to use the one weapon she had. Language. Damien, she said softly. He looked at her, distracted by a file he was reading. My father used to tell me a story about the scorpion and the frog, she said. Damien frowned, looking up. Is this relevant, Sarah? Very. It's about nature. The scorpion asks the frog for a ride across the river. The frog is afraid of being stung. The scorpion promises not to, because if he stings, they both drown. Julian shifted in the front seat. He was listening. I know the story, Damien said impatiently. The scorpion stings him anyway, because it's in his nature. No, Sarah said, locking eyes with Damien, willing him to understand. In the version from my village, the scorpion doesn't sting because of nature. He stings because he was paid by a snake on the other bank. The scorpion doesn't care if he drowns because the snake promised to save his family. Damien went still. He stared at her. He was brilliant. She knew that. He processed the metaphor instantly. The scorpion is in the boat with us. He has been bought. Damien's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, meeting Julian's gaze. Then he looked back at Sarah. He didn't say a word, but his hand moved slowly to his side, unbuttoning his suit jacket. He understood. Julian, Damien called out, his voice casual. Change of plans. Reroute us to the Palm Jumeirah. I want to celebrate before the warehouse. We're already on the exit ramp for the industrial district, boss, Julian said. His voice was different now, harder. Can't turn back. Traffic. I said turn around, Damien commanded, his voice dropping to a growl. Can't do that, Damien. The car swerved violently. Hold on, Damien shouted, throwing his arm across Sarah's chest to pin her to the seat. The SUV didn't take the exit. It veered off the road entirely, crashing through a chain-link fence and skidding into a deserted construction site, a graveyard of half-built concrete pillars and sand. The vehicle slammed to a halt, dust billowing everywhere. Out! Now! Damien kicked the door open before the car even settled. He grabbed Sarah's hand and dragged her into the darkness of the construction yard. Gunfire erupted immediately. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the front seat. Julian was shooting at them through the partition glass. Bullets shattered the window, showering them with glass. Sarah screamed, stumbling as her heel broke in the sand. Damien hauled her up, practically carrying her as they sprinted behind a stack of concrete pipes. "He's the traitor!" Sarah gasped, her lungs burning. "Julian, he's working with Victor." "I gathered that," Damien snapped. He pulled a sleek silver pistol from his holster. He checked the magazine. 3 rounds, damn it. From the cloud of dust near the SUV, headlights cut through the dark. More vehicles were arriving. Mercenaries. Victor's men. "Come out, Damien!" Julian's voice echoed, amplified by the emptiness of the site. "Don't make this messy. Victor just wants a conversation." "A conversation involves words, Julian, not 9mm rounds," Damien shouted back. He looked at Sarah. His face was bleeding from a glass cut, but he looked terrifyingly calm. Adrenaline had sharpened him. "Listen to me," he whispered, gripping her shoulders. "There are at least 10 of them. We can't fight them here. We need to get to the marina. It's 2 miles west. Can you run?" I think so. Take off your shoes." Sarah kicked off her expensive heels. She was barefoot in the sand. "On my signal," Damien said. He peered around the concrete pipe. A shadow moved. A mercenary was flanking them. Damien didn't hesitate. He stepped out, fired 1 shot, a clean, brutal hit to the chest, and grabbed the mercenary's falling rifle before the body hit the ground. "Run!" They took off into the maze of construction equipment. Bullets chewed up the sand around their feet. Sarah ran like she was back in the nightmares of her childhood, running from debt collectors, running from shame. But this time she wasn't alone. They scrambled up a mound of gravel, sliding down the other side into a drainage ditch. The sounds of shouting faded slightly behind them. "They're tracking us with thermal," Damien panted, checking the rifle. "We have 5 minutes before they box us in." He looked at Sarah. She was shaking, covered in dust, her dress torn. "You saved my life in the car," he said, his voice fierce. "That story. You warned me." "I saw his phone," Sarah choked out. "He texted Victor. Plan B." Damien's expression darkened. A look of pure betrayal crossed his face. Julian had been with him for 10 years. "He's a dead man," Damien whispered. "But first, we have to survive." He grabbed her hand again. His grip was iron. "Stay close to me, Sarah. Tonight you're not an employee. You're my partner. We live together, or we die together." They moved like ghosts through the alleys of the industrial park. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a cold, aching exhaustion. Sarah's feet were cut and bleeding, but she didn't complain. She couldn't. The sound of a helicopter rotor beat the air above them. Victor had air support. They found temporary refuge in an abandoned mechanics garage on the edge of the marina district. The roll-down door was rusted half open. They slipped inside, the smell of old oil and rot hitting them. Damien collapsed against a workbench, clutching his side. "You're hurt," Sarah whispered, rushing to him. "Graze," Damien grunted. He moved his hand. His shirt was soaked in blood. It wasn't a graze. A bullet had caught him in the ribs during the escape. "Sit down," Sarah ordered. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange, hyper-focused clarity. She ripped the hem of her expensive navy dress, creating long strips of fabric. "I didn't know you were a field medic," Damien winced as she pressed the cloth against the wound. "My brother," Sarah said, her hands steady. "He has a condition. I've spent more time in hospitals than I have in restaurants. I know how to stop a bleed." Damien watched her. In the dim light of the moon, filtering through the skylight, he looked vulnerable for the first time. The billionaire crime lord was gone. Just a man bleeding in a garage remained. "Why didn't you run?" he asked softly. "In the confusion at the construction site. You could have surrendered. Told them you were just the translator. Victor wouldn't have killed you." Sarah tied the knot tight, making him hiss in pain. "Victor threatened me at the hotel," she said. "He said he'd find out who I was. He said no one would be able to put me back together. If I left you, I'd be dead. And besides," she looked up at him, "you paid for my brother's medication. You gave me a chance when I was invisible. I don't abandon people who help me." Damien stared at her. He reached out, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers were rough, but his touch was gentle. "I have billions of dollars," he murmured. "I have armies. I have politicians in my pocket. And yet, the only person I trust right now is a waitress from Queens." He let out a dry, bitter laugh. "Julian, he was like a brother to me. I pulled him out of a gutter in London. I gave him everything." "Why did he do it?" Sarah asked. "Greed? Jealousy? Maybe he just got tired of being the second in command." Damien closed his eyes for a moment. "It doesn't matter why. It only matters what happens next." "What happens next?" Damien opened his eyes. The obsidian hardness was back. "We stop running. If they catch us, we die. If we hide, they find us. The only way out is to finish the deal." "Finish the deal?" Sarah looked at him like he was crazy. "Damien, we are bleeding in a garage. Julian has your security team. Victor has the Sheikh." "The Sheikh is a man of honor," Damien said. "He hates betrayal. If he knew that Victor and Julian tried to assassinate me on his soil, he would skin them alive. It's an insult to his hospitality." "But we can't get to the Sheikh. He's in the penthouse, surrounded by guards." "No." Damien struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "The Sheikh visits the Falconry Club at sunrise every Friday. Alone. It's his religious ritual. It's private. No guards allowed near the birds." He checked his watch. The crystal was cracked. "It's 4 a.m. Sunrise is in 2 hours. The club is 5 miles from here." "You can't walk 5 miles, Sarah said, looking at the blood seeping through his bandage. "Then I'll crawl," Damien said. "But I am going to be there when the sun comes up, and I'm going to look the Sheikh in the eye." He looked at Sarah. "You don't have to come. It's suicide." Sarah stood up. She looked down at her bloody feet, her ruined dress. She thought about Toby. She thought about the life she had before this, the invisibility, the fear of eviction. She looked at Damien. He was a criminal, yes, but he was fighting for something. He had a code. "I'm not a waitress anymore, Damien," she said. "You said it yourself. I'm your executive consultant." She picked up the rifle Damien had taken from the mercenary. It was heavy, alien in her hands. "Show me how to use the safety on this thing." Damien looked at her, and a genuine smile touched his lips. It was a smile of respect. "You really are full of surprises, Sarah Miller." He showed her the mechanism. Then they moved to the back of the garage. Damien hot-wired an old, dust-covered pickup truck parked inside. It roared to life with a cough of black smoke. "To the Falconry Club," Damien said, shifting gears. As they drove out into the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah watched the city profile. Somewhere out there, Julian was celebrating. Somewhere, Victor was laughing. They didn't know that the Sultan was still alive. And they didn't know he was coming with a weapon they couldn't understand, a girl who had nothing left to lose. The sun began to bleed purple on the horizon. The final showdown was coming. The Royal Falconry Club was a sanctuary of silence amidst the endless rolling dunes of the desert reserve. As the sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the sand in hues of violet and burning orange, The air was cool and still. Sheikh Ahmed stood alone on a wooden platform overlooking the vast emptiness. On his leather-gloved arm sat a magnificent peregrine falcon, its eyes hood-covered. The silence was shattered by the grinding roar of the stolen pickup truck. It crested a dune, engine smoking, and skidded to a halt 50 yards from the sheikh. Damien stumbled out, his face pale as death, blood soaking the makeshift bandage around his ribs. Sarah jumped from the driver's side, rushing to support him. They looked like ghosts, covered in dust, blood, and grease. The sheikh didn't flinch. He didn't turn around. He stroked the falcon's feathers. "You are trespassing," the sheikh's voice carried across the sand. "We are seeking justice," Sarah shouted, her voice cracking with exhaustion. She helped Damien limp forward. Before they could reach the platform, the rhythmic thumping of a helicopter chopped through the air. A black chopper banked hard and landed dangerously close, kicking up a sandstorm that forced Sarah to shield her eyes. Julian jumped out before the rotors stopped, followed by 3 heavily armed men. Victor Cray was right behind him. "Don't listen to them, Sheikh!" Julian screamed, running forward, his gun drawn but pointed at the ground. "They are assassins. They tried to kill me last night. They are here to finish the job on you." Damien tried to speak, but he coughed, doubling over in pain. He was losing too much blood. Julian smirked. He saw Damien's weakness. "Look at him. He's unhinged. I had to put him down to save the deal. Sheikh, allow my men to remove this trash from your sanctuary." The sheikh finally turned. His face was unreadable. He looked at Damien, bleeding in the sand. He looked at Julian, clean and armed. "Violence is forbidden on this ground," the sheikh said quietly. "They brought the violence!" Victor yelled, stepping up. "We are just cleaning it up. Go ahead, Julian." Julian raised his weapon, aiming it at Damien's head. Sarah stood in front of Damien, shielding him with her body. "Move, girl," Julian hissed. "Or you die too." Sarah didn't move. She looked past the gun, past Julian, straight into the eyes of the sheikh. She knew she couldn't outgun them. She had to outmaneuver them. She took a deep breath, drawing on every memory of her childhood, every lesson her father had taught her about the ancient codes of the region. "Ana dakiluk, ya Sheikh Ahmed!" Sarah screamed. The words echoed across the dunes. Julian froze. He hesitated, his finger on the trigger. He didn't know what it meant. But the sheikh did. Dakil. It was the ancient Bedouin law of protection. If a fugitive entered a man's tent and invoked Dakil, the host was bound by honor, bound by God, to protect them against all enemies, even if the fugitive was a murderer, until a fair judgment could be made. To refuse Dakil was to lose one's honor forever. The sheikh's eyes widened. He looked at this American girl in a torn dress who spoke the sacred words of the desert. "She invoked the law," the sheikh said, his voice thundering. "Lower your weapon." "This is insane," Julian shouted. "She's a waitress. She doesn't know what she's saying. Shoot them." Julian swung his gun back toward Sarah. Bang! The shot rang out, sharp and final. Sarah flinched, waiting for the pain, but she wasn't hit. Julian dropped to his knees, a look of shock on his face. He clutched his shoulder, where blood was blooming. The shot hadn't come from Damien. It had come from the sheikh. The old man held a gold-plated revolver, smoke curling from the barrel. He had drawn it with a speed that belied his age. "I said," the sheikh spoke with terrifying calm, "violence is forbidden, and you dared to raise a weapon against a Dakil guest in my presence." Suddenly, the sand dunes around them seemed to come alive. Dozens of the sheikh's royal guard rose from camouflage positions in the ridges, rifles aimed at Victor and his mercenaries. They had been there the whole time. Victor threw his hands up instantly. I have diplomatic immunity. I'm an American contractor." The sheikh walked down the wooden steps. He ignored Victor and walked straight to Sarah. He looked at her with deep respect. "You speak the tongue of the heart," the sheikh said in English, not just the words. He gestured to his guards. "Take the traitors away. The American police can have Victor. But Julian broke the laws of my land." As the guards dragged a screaming Julian away, Damien collapsed into the sand. Sarah caught him, cradling his head in her lap. "Damien!" she cried. "Damien, stay with me!" Damien looked up at her, his vision blurring. He saw the sunrise reflecting in her eyes. He smiled, a weak, genuine smile. You really are good at this," he whispered. Then his eyes closed. 3 months later. The rain was battering the windows of the Golden Onyx in Manhattan, just as it had on that fateful night. But this time, Sarah wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored cream suit that cost more than her old apartment. She sat at table 4, the best table in the house. Across from her sat Marcus, her old manager. He was sweating. "Mummel's Miller," Marcus stammered. "I assure you, the kitchen staff is being retrained. We won't have another slip-up." Sarah took a sip of her sparkling water. She looked at Marcus, not with cruelty, but with authority. "Make sure of it, Marcus. My partner expects perfection." The double doors swung open. Damien Blackwood walked in. He moved a little slower than before, a slight stiffness in his step from the surgery that had reconstructed his ribs, but the power radiating off him was stronger than ever. He walked straight to the table. He didn't shout. He didn't scowl. He sat down next to Sarah and took her hand. "Did you sign the papers?" he asked. "I did," Sarah replied, sliding a folder across the table. "The merger with the Al-Fayed Group is official. You now control the largest shipping lane in the Middle East." "We control it," Damien corrected her. He looked at her, his eyes softening. "How is Toby?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time in years, the smile reached her eyes. "He's out of the hospital. The transplant was a success. He's starting art school next week." Damien nodded. "Good." He signaled for the waiter, a nervous young man who looked exactly like Sarah had 3 months ago. "Champagne," Damien said. "And bring a glass for yourself, son." The waiter blinked. "Sir, you heard me. Tonight, we celebrate." Damien turned back to Sarah. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the table. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "you saved my life. You saved my empire. But more importantly, you understood me when no one else could." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She looked at the box, then at the man who had dragged her from the shadows into the light. "Is that a promotion?" she teased, her voice trembling slightly. Damien laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the room. "Something like that. I need a partner, Sarah. A permanent one. The world is full of snakes and scorpions. I don't want to face them alone anymore." Sarah placed her hand over his. She looked around the restaurant where she used to be invisible. She thought of the desert sunrise. She thought of the fear and the fire. "I'm not going anywhere, Damien," she whispered. "I'm just getting started." Damien opened the box. Inside sat a diamond, as clear and sharp as ice, set in gold that reminded her of the desert sun. Outside, the city continued to run, oblivious to the wars fought in the shadows. But inside the Golden Onyx, the Invisible Girl and the Mafia King toasted to a new reign. And that is how a few words in a forgotten dialect saved $1 billion empire and changed a life forever. From an invisible waitress to the partner of the most dangerous man in the city, Sarah proved that true power isn't about muscles or money. It's about knowledge. She noticed what everyone else ignored, and when the moment came, she didn't just speak, she roared. What would you have done in Sarah's shoes? Would you have taken that check and run, or would you have stepped into the car with the devil? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, romance, and high-stakes drama, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have a thriller coming up next week about a homeless man who turns out to be a missing CEO. And trust me, you won't want to miss the twist. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next chapter.